Quito's government palace, a building steeped in history and power, the stage was set for a high-stakes announcement that carries weight far beyond Ecuador's borders. It was September 4th, 2025, when US Secretary of State Marco Rubio stood alongside Ecuador's Foreign Minister Gabriela Sommerfeld, presenting a unified message of urgency and resolve. The images of the two leaders entering together, solemn and deliberate, captured more than diplomacy. They conveyed a region under siege by criminal violence and a powerful ally stepping forward to signal support. Ecuador, long known for its peace and stability, now finds itself in the headlines for a very different reason: its role as a new front line in the hemispheric war against organized crime. As Rubio and Sommerfeld exchanged a handshake, the symbolism was unmistakable. The United States was not here as a distant observer, but as a partner ready to intervene. For Ecuadorians who have watched their neighborhoods transformed by drug violence, this gesture carried the promise of reinforcement. The press conference unfolded under the watchful gaze of cameras, but what mattered most were the words and the commitments that would follow. Ecuador's crisis has been brewing for years. Sandwiched between Colombia and Peru, two of the world's largest cocaine producers, the nation became an inevitable transit hub. With cartels exploiting ports, prisons, and politicians, the violence escalated into a national emergency. For Washington, the stakes are equally high. What begins in Guayaquil or Esmeraldas does not end there. Cocaine shipments flow to U.S. cities, cartel profits strengthen authoritarian regimes, and instability spreads across borders. Rubio arrived in Quito determined to shift the narrative from despair to action. The Ecuadorian flag inside the palace provided a backdrop, a reminder of sovereignty, but also of the fragility that comes when sovereignty is undermined by cartels more heavily armed than local police. Then came Rubio's first announcement. In Spanish, he declared, "Today we are designating Los Lobos and Los Choneros as terrorist groups." With those words, Rubio redrew the lines of the fight. These two gangs are no longer recognized by Washington as common criminals. They are terrorists. This designation brings with it a formidable set of US legal tools, financial sanctions, international cooperation, and the authority to dismantle support networks worldwide. Ecuadorians know these names all too well. They dominate headlines after prison massacres, orchestrate assassinations of judges, journalists, and even presidential candidates, and maintain an atmosphere of fear that has shaken the nation's democracy to its core. To have the United States brand them as terrorists was not only symbolic, it was a signal that the world's most powerful country was now invested in dismantling their operations. Promises quickly turned into numbers. Rubio continued, announcing, "I can announce that we are allocating $13.5 million to combat drugs and crime. $13.5 million will flow into Ecuador through the State Department." Though modest compared to massive defense budgets, for Ecuador, these funds are critical. They mean better equipment for police, technology to intercept shipments, and training to counter the increasingly militarized cartels. It is seed money designed not just for short-term relief, but for long-term reinforcement. But perhaps the most dramatic statement came when Rubio revealed the possibility of deeper involvement. He said, "We talked about the possibility of stationing US military elements on the ground. The mere suggestion is historic. Over a decade has passed since US forces left Ecuador. Now, the idea of their return underscores the seriousness of the crisis. Such a move would not only provide joint training and intelligence sharing, but would also signal to criminal networks that the fight against them has escalated to an international level. Yet for Ecuador, it also raises difficult questions. Can sovereignty and foreign boots on the ground coexist? Would the presence of US troops deter crime or provoke backlash from neighbors already skeptical of American influence? Rubio's rhetoric then turned northward beyond Ecuador's borders. He declared, "Nicolás Maduro is a drug trafficking terrorist." Rubio stressed that this was not his personal opinion, but the conclusion of a grand jury in New York, which has indicted the Venezuelan president on charges of narco-terrorism. The message was unmistakable. Ecuador's struggle is not isolated. It is linked to regional networks that stretch from Caracas to Mexico City, and Washington sees Maduro not just as a hostile leader, but as a central figure in the criminal web destabilizing Latin America. Then Ecuador's Foreign Minister Gabriela Sommerfeld took the microphone. She explained, "It has been agreed to work together, strengthen capabilities and actions to achieve greater control over the drug routes that affect our nations and combat money laundering through the exchange of information and support with technology and equipment." Her words made clear that Quito is not simply accepting aid, but is positioning itself as an equal partner in the fight. Together, Washington and Quito will not only go after drug routes, but also choke off the lifeblood of organised crime, money laundering. Criminal empires thrive on financial systems that disguise illicit profits. The agreement means better data exchange, technological upgrades and equipment support. For Ecuador, it is a step toward fighting cartels with tools as sophisticated as those wielded by the criminals themselves. Beyond the formal announcements, the significance of this day lies in the broader context. Ecuador has become a tragic case study of how geography can turn a nation into a battleground. Nestled between two cocaine-producing giants, it was only a matter of time before criminal organizations embedded themselves in ports, prisons, and politics. The rise of Los Lobos and Los Choneros reflects a larger trend: gangs mutating into paramilitary forces capable of challenging the state. For ordinary Ecuadorians, the effects are devastating. Families live in fear of stray bullets, businesses pay protection money, and journalists investigating cartel activities are silenced. The crisis has tested Ecuador's democracy, with assassinations of political candidates shaking public confidence ahead of elections. Rubio's visit is also a message to Washington's domestic audience. As Secretary of State, he is positioning the United States as a leader willing to confront narco-terrorism head-on. With gangs spilling drugs into American communities, the Ecuador strategy doubles as a pledge to US voters that Washington is addressing the problem at its source. The shadow of Venezuela looms large. By linking Maduro to the regional crisis, Rubio framed the anti-crime push as part of a wider campaign to isolate Caracas. This approach echoes previous US strategies against regimes accused of harboring or sponsoring terrorism. For Ecuador, aligning with Washington on this issue deepens ties, but also risks drawing the ire of Caracas, Havana, and their allies. Yet for Gabriela Sommerfeld and the Ecuadorian government, the calculation is clear. Without external support, the state risks losing control of its prisons, its ports, and ultimately its sovereignty. With US backing, Quito hopes to regain the upper hand against groups that for too long have acted with impunity. As the press conference ended, images of the two leaders leaving the stage carried a symbolic weight. The fight they pledged to wage together will not end quickly. But on this September day, a message was sent. Ecuador will not face its darkest hour alone. This is not just a bilateral story. It is regional, even global. Drug trafficking networks span oceans, financial crimes cross continents, and instability in Latin America reverberates in Washington, Brussels, and beyond. Rubio's promises, designations, dollars, and potential deployments are only the first chapter in what is certain to be a long, contentious, and deeply consequential battle.
And Ecuador is facing some substantial challenges that come from the exterior. These are narco-terrorists in Ecuadorian territory. One is Los Lobos, and the other is Los Choneros.
Today, we are designating Los Lobos and Los Choneros as terrorist groups, which brings with it a series of options that the United States can pursue through our laws. I can announce that we are allocating $13.5 million to combat drugs and crime through the State Department to help with that reinforcement. We talked about the possibility, something that hasn't been done yet, but the possibility of stationing US military elements on the ground, obviously in cooperation with the government, which creates opportunities to cooperate together, train together, and confront a threat we have in common. Nicolás Maduro is a drug trafficking terrorist, and I'm not saying that. A grand jury in the state of New York is saying that. In the state of New York, the prosecutor's office presented evidence and they indicted him. It has been agreed to work together, strengthen capabilities and actions to achieve greater control over the drug routes that affect our nations and combat money laundering through the exchange of information and support with technology and equipment.